Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another Geo-Institute live stream. It is, of course, the summer of live. We have been telling you that now for 2 months, so if you have not picked up on it, I guess that's kind of on you. But we have a lot more programming coming for the next 2 months, which is going to be equally amazing. It is, fun, of course, informative, educational. You can choose any adjectives you wish. My name is Brad Keeler. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and welcome to a special live stream. It's special for a few reasons. One, if you're eagle-eyed, and I think you are, you will notice that it is noon Eastern Time. We do not usually come to you at noon, but here we are. Wherever you are, the time will correspond. I can guarantee you that. So if you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, I always wonder how you got here. But if you don't, after you watch this interview today, you should head over to geo-institute.org, and there you will find out many things about us, including that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. And if you like what you see today, and I think you will, I always feel very strongly about that, you should click like, subscribe, and get notifications. And if you do those things in that order, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Before we get to our feature presentation today, I will remind you that we have Ralph Peck bobbleheads, and one of those could be yours. And the way you go about doing that is to head again to geoinstitute.org, and over in the top right of that screen, you will find a button that says, or a tab, excuse me, that says Student Participation Fund. If you click on that, it will open a new window and it will come to this screen where you can make your contribution to GI student programs. We are, of course, aiming to match the $500,000 that past President Jean-Louis Briot and Janet Briot gave last year. If we do that, we have endowed our student programs. There are all kinds of great gifts up here. Again, the bobbleheads are for a contribution of $96 or more. We have quarter zips available for a contribution of $250 or more. We have amazing student participation fund pins designed with the spirit of Jean-Louis Briot in mind. The first one has a cowboy hat and his signature on it. You do not want to miss out on that. So with all that out of the way, actually one more thing today, I will shout out ASCE Continuing Education, who have partnered with us to bring you this event with the committee that we will again mention in just a moment. For more information on training and continuing education services, go to asce.org, click education, and you're going to get a whole bunch of stuff up there, including a list of upcoming courses, ways that you can claim your free PDHs as an ASCE member, and a lot more. Now, we are very excited to be partnering with the Younger Members Committee of the Geo-Institute for this live stream today. It's their first big event. We just started a National Younger Members Committee earlier this year. And a representative from that committee is going to tell you what you are going to see today. And so here he is. It is Intisar Ahmed. Intisar, thank you so much for doing this, for emceeing, and for your leadership on the Younger Members Committee. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad. As Brad said, I'm part of the ASCE Geo-Institute's Younger Members Committee, also known as the YMC, and I currently chair the committee. So a quick shout out to our committee. We're really involved in making sure that those who are age 35 or below are engaged and building community within the Geo-Institute. So if that resonates with you, please reach out to me via LinkedIn and join our LinkedIn group. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you right to it. Some cool things we've done are special technical sessions at GI conferences. Keep an eye out for the next one at the Geo Extreme. We'll be sending out our call for abstracts soon. Other things we're doing is partnering with local sections or chapters to host networking events. Now, to go introduce our speakers, I'm very pleased to have Stef and Vatsal with us. So Stef Goodenow is the Chief Officer of Member Services at NCEES. She has served in that role for 15 years and is responsible for working both with licensing boards and licensees on exam registration, education evaluations, and other general licensing issues. Vatsal Shah, PhD, PE, BCGE, is a licensed civil geotechnical engineer in 46 states and the president and CEO of ANS, a multidisciplinary civil, structural, and geotechnical firm with over 200 staff in 18 offices across the U.S. In addition to industry practice, he teaches geotechnical engineering at NYU and NJIT and conducts PE and FE prep courses nationwide. So I think we got some really great speakers to speak on PE licensure. I honestly don't think we could have done better, so I'm very pleased to and excited to hear what they have to say. So now I'll pass it off to Stef.
All right, thank you. I'm going to just share my screen. Okay, somehow I ended up at the end of my... Okay. Okay, so as they mentioned, my name is Stef, and I am the Chief Officer of Member Services at NCEES. So I do a lot with licensure, and so I'm here to just talk through the licensure process today, as well as different programs that we have at NCEES that can help you once you are licensed. And so just wanted to kind of mention briefly a little bit about licensure and why it is that it can be an important thing to pursue. In general, when you're getting hired, people are looking for some very specific things about you. And one of the things that's super important is to prove yourself, prove your expertise in a selected field. And so this licensure process is something that can actually get you there and help you sort of stand out amongst the crowd. And so being a professional engineer can do a lot for you. You can own your own firm if you wish. You can do consulting. You can obviously sign and seal your own work, which is one of the main reasons why a lot of individuals pursue that. And you can bid for public money, advertise. There just opens a lot more doors for you as an actual engineer. You definitely stand out. So even if it's not something that you want to pursue for your own purposes or your own firm purposes, you certainly stand out in the crowd whenever you're applying for new jobs. You also stand out to your employer because someone who's licensed is a lot more of a benefit to your employer. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. You do serve the public, not just your employer. And I think that's an important distinction as well, because as a licensed engineer, you do have a responsibility to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public that you are designing things for. So we all in our little communities rely on professional engineers to really, truly know what they are doing. And the licensure process is the part that makes it obvious that you are capable in what you are doing. So a little bit of the pieces of licensure. We generally say there are three parts: education, experience, and exams. So 3 E's is kind of how we look at it. We also sort of call it a three-legged stool. Without all the pieces, the stool can be a little bit wobbly. So it's important to know what those 3 pieces are and why each one of them is important. So the first part usually is your education. So it's the thing that you usually start off with and what sort of leads you to the path of possibly becoming a licensed engineer. So in the United States, most state licensing boards are looking for your education to be ABET accredited. ABET is the accrediting body for engineering education curriculum throughout the United States and also beyond. They accredit programs throughout the world nowadays. So state boards are first looking for that. Now, if you don't have an ABET accredited degree, there definitely are other paths. So it's not just if you don't have an ABET accredited degree, this isn't a thing for you. It's absolutely a thing. And it would typically require from most state licensing boards that you have an evaluation of your education performed. Now, every state board in the country will accept an NCEES evaluation. So we have an evaluation service and an evaluation process. And that process is where we are basically comparing the education that you earned throughout your career, mostly focused on the bachelor's degree, but we will also include graduate level coursework as well, should it be needed. And we are basically comparing it to a standard. And that standard is listed on our website under our services. If you go to ncees.org, you can read about that standard. And so we're doing an evaluation and providing information to a state board. I will just make a note that if you have deficiencies in your education compared to our standard, it does not mean that you can't get licensed either. It either means you could make up some of those courses, or some state boards are just not going to be concerned with certain deficiencies. So you can have some deficiencies and still have a very easy time getting licensed. It's really just an advisory tool for state boards to use, and they will make a determination about how your education compares to their specific requirements. And one thing you'll hear me say multiple times, anytime you're talking with me, you're going to hear that every state board does things a little bit differently. So you're always going to need to check with any state that you're pursuing licensure for. Even if you are actually licensed, it's still important to make sure that you are understanding other states that you might need to pursue licensure within. Each state, they're going to have slightly different requirements. And so while the general information that we post about and the general information I will present here is the sort of norm and what most state boards are going to be looking for, all the different small pieces of the qualifications definitely can be different per state. So it's important to know what your state and any state you apply to in the future is going to require. The experience is another piece of this process, and that is also in some ways, it's one of the more difficult things to establish, especially if you've been doing it for a while and you have lots of experience, but then documenting that experience can be challenging. So I certainly encourage you that if you're just starting out to be working on this process, thinking through this process now, instead of having to go back and make it fit once you actually have been working for quite a while. So you do generally need 4 years of work experience. In some instances, especially if your education is not ABET accredited, you will need additional years of experience, usually between 6 or 8 years. It definitely depends on your education, and that's kind of what determines how many years of experience most state boards are going to need. So if you don't have that ABET accredited degree, then you may need to have more years of experience. So that's something to expect. And you will also have to document all of this information, and you will also have to have it signed off on. Again, this can also vary by state licensing board, but who signs off on your work is important. If you have someone who is considered your supervisor and they are a professional engineer, they are licensed, then that will meet the needs of pretty much every state board. So if you don't have that and you would be doing something slightly different, you would want to check with your state board just to be certain that you have an understanding of what it is they're going to require. But it's also something that you can be looking for when you are looking for a job or potentially taking on a new role. Is your supervisor going to be someone who can sign off on that work? And so it's definitely an important piece of the puzzle. It's probably the piece that state boards take or find to be the most important. As far as really, they very much scrutinize this information. So it's really important to be very mindful about this information and how to document it and who's going to sign off on it, even before you're ready for the process. The exams, that's probably the piece that most everyone is familiar with. There's obviously the FE exam and the PE exam. In the vast majority of situations, the FE and the PE are both required. Some states will waive the FE exam. I don't usually encourage individuals to look for that if you don't have to. And certainly the closer you are to having graduated from your education, the much better and easier it is to pass that exam. So I always encourage people to take the FE exam either while they're in college or as soon after college as they can, even if they're not really sure that they're going to pursue licensure. Go ahead and take the exam. It's absolutely a game changer to be able to have that exam finished, passed, and you don't even have to worry about it, because even if you ended up at an employer who really isn't going to require that you get licensed, you never know where life's going to take you, and to have to go back and take that FE exam when it's been 10 years and life happens and all of that, it's much more challenging to do. So go ahead and do it if you have not already done it. Just try to get it out of the way. And then the PE exam is also an obvious hurdle to getting licensed. It's certainly the sort of main exam that state boards are going to require for the process. So just a little bit about each exam. The FE is 7 freestanding disciplines. So you have those disciplines listed there. The other discipline is generally used by anyone who doesn't fit into one of the other categories. And I will just say that if you graduated with a degree in civil engineering, you generally are going to do better with the civil FE exam versus taking other disciplines. A lot of people say, I'm just going to take the other discipline because it seems easier. Most people don't find it to be easier if one of the disciplines is the degree that you earned. So certainly encourage you to look at the specifications and figure out which exam would best suit you. I also will just say, you just have to have a passing FE exam result. Doesn't matter at all which discipline you pass. So if you think that you could pass one of the others easier, you are more than welcome to do it. We don't even pass on the discipline of the FE exam that you pass to the state boards. They don't use that for any purpose. There is a reference handbook. It's a supplied reference for while you're taking the exam, and there are 110 questions. And we also do alternative item types, so it's not all just multiple choice. There are a fair number of multiple choice questions, but there are also other types of questions like multiple correct, the fill in the blanks. There are some true and false, drag and drop. All those are considered alternative. So even though the exam is given on a computer-based format, it is not all just multiple choice. For the PE exam, there are obviously multiple disciplines. And for most of you sitting out there, there's one exam that you are probably looking to take, and that would be the PE Civil Geotechnical exam. But again, if you are practicing in another type of discipline, you could take an additional PE exam, especially if you need to be licensed with one of the states that is discipline specific. So they do require that you take the correlating PE exam discipline that you would need a license for. The vast majority of boards, however, do not do that. And so you would take one of these exams and you would be able to practice in any area that you deem that you have the skill set and could prove that should you be asked about it. I will say that the civil exam, which does have 5 disciplines within it, geotech being one of them, if you were to pass the geotech exam, you would not be allowed to take, for example, the PE civil transportation. You can only take the PE civil exam one time. If you pass it, you don't take it again. You could take a chemical, or you could take a PE environmental, but you could not take another discipline of the civil exam. That also exists for electrical and computer, which we have 3 different disciplines of that exam. And also we have 3 different disciplines of the mechanical exam, with a 4th sub-discipline for the mechanical coming on in 2027. That being, we are going to have a plumbing exam for mechanical. So that is, those 3 exams all have sub-disciplines and would function in the same way. The PE exams are administered mostly year-round. The larger volume exams are administered pretty much any day of the week of the year, minus holidays, and they sometimes are not, a lot of times are not open on Sundays. But you could literally schedule an appointment for any time. We do have some exams that are only given one time per year, or in the case of the PE structural exam, not the PE civil structural, but the PE structural exam, that exam is given 2 times per year in April and October. And so those one time per year exams are, a lot of it has to do with the volume of examinees. So that is why they're only offered one time per year. And you see a 9-hour appointment or 9.5-hour appointment, depending on the exam. So it's a long time. The exams themselves are typically in the 8-hour range, with the extra hour being other appointment things and breaks. So that's what that is. And all of our exams always have a supplied reference. So you're not allowed to take all of your books into the exam room, but you will be supplied this reference. You can download any of these supplied references for free on our website. And I'll show you right now where they are. So on this page, you can see my NCEES dashboard. And that is what you would need. You'd need to create a My NCEES account. So if you have not already, I would definitely encourage you to do that. You can find that. It's a big red button on our NCEES.org website. On this page, you can view reference handbooks. That's one of the options that's listed in those list of links in the top right corner. And you can literally download for free any of the supplied reference handbooks that we have out there. You can download the PE environmental if you just really want to. So they're all available for free. To register for an exam, then the next thing down is the exams button, and you're registering for an exam just like that. For the FE exam, and for really all of our exams, you are registering through a state licensing board. So you would select the state that you would are going to want to be approved by. And then you are attesting to their specific information. So when you select a state, it has an attestation that you are understanding about the way that they are approving for the exams, and the way that some boards have very specific details about licensure. So you'll want to read through that and acknowledge that. For the FE exam only, we do have a couple of other things that you add on. We have what we call a Credly badge, which is basically just a social media thing, but you do have to opt in to do that. So once you pass the FE exam, you can have a little badge that you can show in your social media. That's through an organization called Credly, and that's why it's listed that way. But unless we have permission from you to opt you in for that, we cannot do that. So you opt in while you're registering. And also, if you are taking the FE exam before you graduate from college, we now have a program to give honor cords for those that are graduating and have passed the FE exam. So the FE exam honor cords, and we do it for the FS exam too, because we do surveying for NCEES as well. But that is one option as well that you have to opt into. It allows us to give your university the fact that you passed, and then we also provide an honor cord for free to the university for you to wear. We also, during the registration process, do practice exams, and if accommodations are needed, you can certainly select that you would need an accommodation while you're in the registration process. So the next couple of slides are really just about programs that we have at NCEES once you are licensed, or when you are seeking licensure in the vast majority of states. And then we also use this record program for PE exam approval. There are definitely a handful of states that use it for that process as well. So the record is a way to provide your typically needed documentation for that any state board is going to require in order to issue you a license. So rather than each time you apply to each state board, you have to supply all of the same information over and over again each time. So you would have to have your university send your transcript directly to that state board. You'd have to get your exam information verified and sent to that state board. So rather than doing that, we have a program where you can put all of your documentation in your it's in your My NCEES account. It's under multi-state licensure is the button that it is. And all boards use this for comedy licensure. So every state in the country will accept the documentation in the NCEES record for comedy licensure. You can see there are 30 boards. It's actually more than that. It's closer to 40 at this point, accept it for initial licensure. So when you're applying to a board, you've already passed the FE, you've already passed the PE exam, and you're applying to a board for your first license, you can use this record documentation. And then again, some boards will actually use this information for PE exam approval. You'll just want to check the page to make sure that the state that you're applying to is going to need this. So a lot of state boards have done what we've called decoupling, and that means that they no longer care about the work experience that you have prior to taking the PE exam, and they will allow you to take the PE exam whenever you feel ready. You still have to have the 4 years of work experience or whatever a state board requires. So you still have to have that part. So you're not going to get licensed until you have that. But should you feel completely ready to take the PE exam at the 3-year mark, most of these boards are now allowing that. So that is an opportunity out there. The record contains several pieces of information. Like I mentioned, education transcripts. State boards require that you verify your education no matter where it was earned. So official transcripts have to be sent directly from the institution to NCEES. Exam and license information. If you have a license, that's required to be verified. And if not, then your exams are required to be verified. And that's part of your record. The professional references are sort of character references, but 3 of them must be currently PE licensed. So the professional references section, relatively easy section to get completed as long as you have the name and an email address of someone who can fill this form out for you. And that, so getting that done is, they get an email, they just fill it out, they send it back in, and it's immediately updated in your account. And then the work experience verification. This is, of course, the piece that takes the vast majority of your time to get completed, but this is something that is important to the process, and so it has to be done right. We have licensed engineers reviewing each entry that you submit, so we have to make sure that it's written in the appropriate format. And once we've approved that, then it gets sent to a supervisor or whoever you've listed to sign off and verify that information, and they are then going to sign off on it and complete that process. So in general, like one of the things that people say all of the time, and really the record program has existed since about the 70s. So it's been around for a really long time, but you don't have to send that same documentation to each board. And that has been an issue since the 70s, which is why this program was created. It's all completely digital at this point. So it was a lot different back in the 70s. It was all handwritten information, but it's definitely an upgraded process at this time. Usually you can establish a record within a week or two, depending on how diligent you are with following up with your supervisors and making sure your information is getting updated. And you can begin entering information free of charge. You only are charged a fee when you transmit it to a state board, and that fee is $100. And so any state that you transmit it to, you'll pay a $100 fee to send all of this information. And it will provide that state with the supporting documentation to your application to them. So it's not the actual application, but it is the documentation. So most state boards will have either a completely different application for you to use if you're sending also the record, or on their application they will say skip pages 6 through 25 because your record information is what's supplying that information. So it makes it a lot easier to do that. You can apply to multiple boards at one time rather than having to send all the same documentation to each state board. And last, I'm just going to mention our CPC tracking. Anybody who is licensed in more than one state, and even if you're just licensed in one state, using the CPC tracking system is a huge benefit to you. CPC, continuing education, state boards all call this something completely different. They'll call them PDHs. They'll call them CPDs. There's a whole host of names. At NCEES, we've just landed on calling it CPC, and which stands for Continuing Professional Competency. And we have recognized that every state does CPC very differently, and their requirements are different. Their renewal periods are different. And so the time frame that you're supposed to be taking all these courses is going to be different by state. And this program has existed for about 4 or 5 years. It's free to anyone. All you need is a NCEES account. And you'll see CPC tracking as one of those buttons in the left-hand column. You're just going to enter the coursework, upload certificates, and then you can track all of those courses with the state licensing boards, all the states that you're licensed within. So you can easily view that you've met the requirements for all these states and their different requirements. And then should a state board audit you, you can easily send a transcript to them. So that makes it also an easy program to use. And just a little bit of contact information in case you've got questions, especially beyond this presentation. We are available 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. We are on the East Coast. We are in South Carolina, so that is 8 to 5 Eastern time. You see our phone number there, which is on our website. And then we also have a chat bubble or chat available to you if it's between those hours. And then also you can email help@ncees.org, and we will definitely respond to you. So I believe we'll take some questions later. So I am going to stop sharing and turn it over to Vatsal.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. And thanks everyone for joining here today, whether you're on the East Coast during your lunch break or on the West Coast during your breakfast break. I wanted to echo a lot of what Stephanie mentioned before, and I wanted to share some background. I was very glad to be asked by the ASCE younger member group here to be speaking about my background as a PE, the process, and also to share some useful study tips. It may have been a few years since I've got my PE license, but a lot of the same study tips still remain consistent across the board. I also want to call out one more item here. As Brad mentioned earlier, ASCE, the Geo-Institute, is not just engineers, it's also scientists and geologists. So you're going to hear the term PE and FE thrown around quite a bit, but also want to share some love to the geologists and the GIT and the PG. A lot of these same study tools and ethics and professional licensure mirror that for geology as well. So I want to make sure we recognize the folks who are more than engineers here in the room. So before I get started, I just want to share some background about me, and hopefully give you some context as to why I'm having this conversation with all of you. You see a lot of information on this slide. From my educational background, I went for an undergrad, then a master's, and then a PhD. Became a licensed PE, my first state back in 2011, my home state of New Jersey. And then I continued on for the last 14 or so years to go over and get licensed in a number of additional states across the U.S. I did that while working full-time. I worked as an engineering technician in the field, doing concrete cylinders, doing compaction testing. I got into a full-time consulting role, worked as a staff engineer, worked my way up to a more of a leadership position. And now I'm the president and CEO of ANS, which is a multidisciplinary engineering company. I've been a professor for a couple of years as well. I've taught at my alma mater, NGIT, as well as in New York at NYU. I've been a practitioner with the School of PE and a few other PE and FE review courses, and been very actively involved with the National Society of Professional Engineers and ASCE along the way. So why don't I share all this information? I share it because some of you are still students, some of you are practitioners, some of you are consulting, some of you are professors, and some of you are still deciding which direction to go down the path of. I've had a very unique opportunity here to be wearing a number of different hats throughout my career. And I always find these conversations really useful to be able to share how I've experienced the value of licensure across each of these different groups here. So hopefully you get something from this presentation, whether you're a student, you're a professor, you're still deciding, you're in practice. I hope this is relevant to you. So I'll take a moment to just echo a lot of what Stephanie mentioned before on the value of PE licensure. Yes, it's two initials, and I hope a lot of us engineers who are in this conversation and geologists, they want to take a step forward into licensure. The most important item in my mind is that by going after licensure, you're recognizing that this is a career for you now. It's not just a job. A job you can go in, you can get your work done, you go home, but a career takes additional investment, it takes time, it takes attention, it takes care. It's really a step above and beyond what you would consider just being in a role or being in a job for. The next step, as Stephanie mentioned, also is just job security. We have a lot of new technology coming out there. We have new roles, new titles. We have new AI things coming up there too. I've had to hire over 300 plus people in the last 10, 15 years of my job responsibility, and I've always found that people who have an EIT, FE, GIT, or PE, they're always very dedicated to the work that they do, and a PE license always sets you apart in that conversation. Whether you haven't your license, you put in your resume, hey, I'm looking for the PE, I'm taking it. It's a good conversation starter. I've never had a situation where I've said, oh, you're taking the PE, why are you doing that? It's always, you're taking your PE, that's fantastic for you. I'm happy to hear that you're going that direction. Legal recognition is also important too. Fun fact, contrary to what your degree says, you're not an engineer, you're in the field of engineering. Almost every state board, the title engineer is reserved for professional engineers. So you can't call yourself an engineer. You can't go out to the public and offer yourself out as an engineer. You can be practicing engineering, the field of engineering, but you can't actually be an engineer by term. Only licensed PEs can do that. And also only licensed PEs can serve as expert witnesses, own their own PE firms, provide engineering judgment to public. There's an additional level of responsibility it takes to get past the exam. And that additional level of responsibility, whether you're a PE or a PG, does help the society you realize that you're also meeting a minimum level expectation of qualifications and ethics. For those that are also here that are professors or in the academic track, you might ask yourself, why am I to go after a FE, EIT, or go after my PE license? Licensed professors always inspire students to move forward to the next stage of their career. You're often one of the first folks that students get in contact with, and how you carry yourself as a professor in academia, the value of ongoing education and continuing education, it really is a big deal for students. So even if you don't use it in practice and stamp a drawing or go up there and be an expert witness, it's very often really important because they may be the first people that they see in the industry, and having a PE license sets them on the right course as to where they should be going to, what they should be aspiring towards in their career. The other item is, if you're a student and you want to inspire to give back to others, and you want to mentor and help others come up behind the ranks, being a PE allows you to actually act as an eligible mentor to EITs. When you take your PE exam, when you take your EIT exam, you often ask for references. And they ask you, is your reference a professional engineer? To be in that formal role of mentoring EIT, you have to be a PE yourself. So this allows you to have that one additional pathway towards mentoring, not only inspiring students and bringing them up, but also being the responsible person in charge in front of them to help them move forward in their careers. As I mentioned to you before, a lot of times we change careers. In our generations, things are different. 20, 30, 40 years ago, we might stick with one profession, and you were John Doe working at XYZ company. Now you might change your career multiple times. We see on average that people change their career between 6 and 8 times in their entire lifetime. Being licensed gives you the flexibility to go into various different roles, whether it's senior leadership, a technical standpoint, being a manager, or being in academia. That PE affords one more level of flexibility for you and provides just one more criteria for you to continue moving forward. And the last item I'd point out here, being on the National Society of Professional Engineers, there's a really interesting study done about 12 years ago, and it was trying to figure out the average value of a PE license over a non-PE license holder. And I used to throw this term out there because what's the value of $400,000 to each of you in this room? Most of you probably roll your eyes at me and say, of course, it's a large amount of money. Of course, I'd want that large difference. On average, a PE makes between $8,500 and $9,000 a year over a non-licensed counterpart. Not exactly the number, but on average, tends to be a little bit of a gap there. And you can check my math over a 40-year career at 3% annual raises across the board, which is fairly reasonable. And getting your PE at 5 years, that number and that separation year over year adds up to about $400,000 in a lifetime. That's not a small number. And I hope we don't just do it for the economic reasons for it, but it is a large driver to maybe help you get over the hump there. So I pulled some really good stats from NCEES' website. They have a fantastic report called Squared they put out there in 2024 last year. And before I jump into study tips, I want to first get you through the first hump of why should I take the exam and why take it now? There's some interesting points on this NCEES report, which is the first time advantage. If you look at the data, the first time pass rates are always higher than those with repeat attempts. Now, you can always say that those that passed the first time aren't in the pool of repeat attempts, so the pool is naturally lower. But what also comes down to show is that that first time attempt, sometimes just taking the exam and being prepped for it, not waiting until you're 5 and 6 and 7 years, hoping for the right time, hoping for more time in your schedule, take the exam. Often when you're coming out of school, it's still fresh in your mind. You may have less responsibilities at home or at work or both. Don't wait time and risk the momentum that you're going to have coming out of school. Take the exam. That first time advantage really does show up as high as almost 70% pass rate in those first time takers. Timing also matters too. If you look at the graphs they had, and I showed it here on the slide, if you look at from 0 to 5 years, the peak happens around 4 or 5 years. Stephanie mentioned decoupling, where a number of states allow you to take the exam right after school or whenever you're ready. That allows you to take the exam when you feel confident to be able to take it. But the pass rates still end up peaking around 4 to 5 years. If you have more experience, you understand the industry a little bit better. You may have had more time to digest the topics. But you also find that after 5 years, there's almost a drastic drop-off in the pass rates, that red line going above and beyond. And it continues to lose about 3 to 4% year over year to less than 50% after 10 years of being outside of your schooling. So time is of the essence. So if you're thinking about the PE exam, there's no better time to start than now. And also life gets busier, right? There's no secret that when you're in college, you may have less responsibilities than if you would later on in your career. You may have more promotions. You may have direct reports. You may have harder projects. You may have more stakeholders. You have a bigger family. You have a home or mortgage to take care of. Life happens along the way. And I can always tell you that a year ago, you're going to wish you started today. So the sooner you take the exam, the easier it is to prioritize and prepare for it. The graphs, the numbers all show it, but it's true, right? If you're thinking about the exam, if you're in this webinar, there's a likelihood that you're thinking about taking this. Sign up for it. Go through the hardest part of getting over the hump of applying for the exam, and then start studying. Even if you don't pass the first time around, it's okay because you'll know what to do for the next time around. So use the momentum you have, even from this webinar, to springboard into your next step moving forward. So this is a conversation about geotechnical engineering, but before I even do that, there's always some best practices taking the PE exam. Whether you're a civil, you're going towards structural or water resources or transportation or geotechnical, as you're mentioning, there's some standard best practices I have. And passing the exam is not just about having the knowledge. It's about the strategy you're going to take to pass the exam, how you prepare for it, and whether you believe it or not, the endurance that you have. So Stephanie spent some good time here on knowing the format. Right, it's an 8-hour computer-based exam, no outside references. So your old manager who said he used to bring a whole crate of binders with him and open up his books in the middle of his exam, you're not going to have to carry a crate. You're going to have it all available at your fingertips using the NCEES provided PE reference handbook on the screen. But you should know the format. And if you log on to NCEES and go to the resources, check out the examinee guide. If you just Google NCEES examinee guide for the PE license, it is fantastic. It has where to get the handbook, which is important for us. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it also has some really good information about how the day goes, right? What time you should arrive, how you should prepare. Can you bring snacks? When can you have breaks? What's an accommodation? What's not? How will you prepare? What prompts will you go through? What time will you have your break? Spend some time to go through that. It shouldn't take more than 5 and 10 minutes. And again, momentum. If you find that you're getting to a small point where I'm not sure if I want to take the exam, not ready to study just yet, I'm at a mental block, Use that time during your mental block to pop open the NCEES reference guide and just poke around there, or go on the resource examinee guide and see what's the day look like. Any time you spend towards this exam is a positive step forward, right? So if you find you're stuck on studying, pop open the examinee guide, read it for a little bit. Speaking of examinee guide, that PE reference handbook, the great thing about this is they have everything searchable. Control F and you can find whatever you want on there. What I strongly suggest you do is whatever exam you take in the civil, scroll through that book. Yes, it's a couple hundred pages long. You don't have to read the entire book, but if you're going through the geotechnical portion, for instance, just scroll through. Spend one of your prep days or prep hours just going through exam and looking at the formulas. If you can understand the formula or where it comes from or what the output or input are going to be, hey, this is about Atterberg limits. This one's about grain size. This is asking about consolidation. Do I know these topics? That's a first step. If you feel like you know the consolidation equation or you know the equation on elastic settlement, then maybe you feel comfortable with that. If you don't know any clue about where that formula came from, maybe just write it down. Hey, I don't know where this formula came from. It's about consolidation. I got to brush up on that. It's worthwhile knowing what these formulas mean, not to memorize them because you have them available during your exam, but just know where to find the equations and know they exist. In the back of your mind, and you're just going to trigger, I remember seeing this somewhere. I know it's in the FE hand or the PE handbook. I can go and find it. So spend some of your study time looking at these resource guides, just being prepped, knowing what you'll have at your fingertip, and knowing how the day's going to flow for you. The next one's a pretty important one, right? And it sounds like it's basic, but I'll just say it again. This exam is 8 hours long. That's a marathon. Most exams you took in college are 3 hours, maybe 2.5. Maybe that's a longer exam than that, but you don't just go from running a mile a day to running a full marathon over the week. You go through small bouts of these stretches and longer prep sessions along the way. This is nothing different. You may not know how you behave in an 8-hour exam until you take the exam. So you might as well have a few weekends before or a few days before this exam starts. Have a few practice sessions where you're locked in a room, you're by yourself, where you happen to have space, and see how you behave in 8 hours. Do you find yourself having highs in the beginning where you have a lot of energy and then you start to mellow out after 2-3 hours, right? You need a break again. Do you find yourself having a mellow start with a really strong end of the last 2-3 hours? Plan your exam, plan your questions, plan the harder questions around times of energy bursts, and plan the easier ones around the lulls. Know how your body reacts so you don't just show up to the exam for 8 hours, find out that you're really, really burnt out by hour 4 and you can't continue moving forward. I see a lot of folks when we take the exam mention the same thing. You know, I wish I had thought through the process a little bit longer, and I wish I had done a few more longer study sessions because it was a grueling exam. 8 hours is a long time to sit still there. And then things that we already know, right? Study smart. Accountability makes everything go a lot easier and also keeps you moving forward. So find a study group, find a study buddy. If you're in the field, find someone you also have in the field you can kind of talk to, even friends and family. Let them know you're studying. Maybe someone in your peer group is studying for a similar exam or studying for graduate school. Having people hold you accountable holds them accountable also. Use that strength in groups here too. And lastly, check your tools, right? You're allowed to bring a calculator to the tool. As simple as I had someone who had their calculator die mid-exam, and you can use one on screen. It's a small TI-80, I think TI-80 calculator, but you may not know how it works and how the buttons work, and you're going to waste time trying to figure it out. Check your batteries, make sure the calculator works. Don't let a simple mistake ruin months of training and learning along the way. So this is all basic stuff, right? I want to dive into a little bit more because geotechnical engineers are a little bit different than the rest of the civil group, in the sense that some of you may be in the field often and you do a long 8, 9, 10-hour field stint. You're traveling back and forth to a site, you're working on some longer deliverables. It's just a different type of study than being in an office more frequently. But I will say before I start, however you study, just give yourself some grace, allow yourself to build momentum. Field work is exhausting. Trying to find time in between pockets is also difficult. Consistency is the most important thing over intensity. So make sure you're doing it frequently in whatever pockets time you have. One solved problem, a couple pages read, scrolling through the FE or PE handbook in one day is better than nothing. Again, consistency over intensity. But I will say that if you want to study some best practices, treat it like a meeting, right? If you know you're going to be studying for this exam, put it on your calendar. Whether it's your work calendar, your home calendar, whatever you check frequently, make it a priority. Even if it's 30 minutes after work, hey, I leave work at 4:30 or 5 p.m. or whatever you leave, I'm going to dedicate 30 minutes. And it's going to be a long day, and have to add 30 minutes on top is just even more of a mind-numbing process. but put it in your calendar or put it on your lunch calendar. Hey, I have to hold this really, really strong. I cannot schedule meetings around this 30-minute block. The more you prioritize it, the easier it is for you. Which also brings up another point. If you are at work, make sure that your peers and your supervisor know this too. Studying for a P and going after that doesn't just benefit you, it benefits your peers, it benefits your firm, it benefits your group. If you feel comfortable in sharing it, let your team know, I'm studying for the PE. I may be a little more flexible. I might be more rigid in my calendar right now, but it's a really hard time for me for 3 months. I want to protect it, get through those 3 months, and I'll be able to give some more time back again. Communicate and let them know it's happening. It makes it easier to have those meetings and those blocks. People are more aware of it. If they don't know, they can't accommodate you, right? So make sure you're clear on that. Try to find small pockets of time, right? Whether it's commutes or breaks or evenings. Let's be realistic. You're not going to get a 2-hour block that just opens up on a Wednesday afternoon, right? If you're planning to get a whole weekend for free, unless you plan ahead of time, or if you're planning for some time after a long day, you're not going to get 2 hours. It's really hard to get it. So just plan for 15, 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day. Those small pockets of time add up. 15 minutes a day over the course of your given business weeks and month is 7 hours per month. That's a good amount of time to study. So use those small pockets along the way. Mix it up, right? Do more than just read a book, right? Get involved in teaching others. Talk to others about it. Use practice problems. Use flashcards. Variety is key, right? Focus on active learning. Do more than just example problems. Don't just read. And also use the materials that you know work for you. If you are a person that loves podcasts, you love hearing, then pick a study method that allows you to hear and refresh. If you enjoy being in person, then pick a reference class or something that allows you to do in-person review courses. A lot of people like ASCE and others offer in-person courses. You can do just that. If you enjoy doing studying on your own time, you can't sit through 4 hours in a classroom on a weekend, that's fine too. Some offer virtual. You can see it on YouTube. You can find resources. You know how you study best. Make sure you match up with that too. And then again, make a study plan. Sit down in the beginning of your process before you start studying and say, I want to study these sections. Doesn't have to be down to the T. I want to do bearing capacity on this day. That's not important. It's not required. But you might want to say, hey, I have 19 weeks between now and then, or 12 weeks between now and my exam. Here's briefly how I want to break this thing out. This week might be water resources. Next is geotechnical. Next is structural. Here's reviewing the NCEES. I take a break week along the way. Have a general plan. Any roadmap is easier to stay attached to than just hoping to study on a weekend. And then a few more items. Study with anchor habits. I found this really helpful too. If you have an anchor habit, meaning something that you do just frequently every day. Hey, I have coffee in the morning. I spend 20 minutes to read the newspaper, or I do X, Y, Z. I read the blogs in the morning. If you know you do that anchor habit every single day, tag on studying to it. Hey, I'm going to brew my coffee and I'm going to do 5 practice problems alongside it. I'm going to be reading the sites during my lunch break, and I'm going to do 3 or 4 pages of reading alongside. If you already do something, you've already gotten into the momentum of doing something different. Add on one more thing. It makes it easier to flow from one thing to the next. And I call them anchor habits because they've been helpful for me in the past. And the last thing is target your study topics wisely. We all want to feel like we're doing great. So human nature is to pick questions and problem sets that you know you're going to do really well. Hey, I'm really good at looking at track seal work. I'm really good at looking at settlement analyses. And I keep doing more and more of the problems to reaffirm that I got this, that I know what I'm doing. Actually, pick the ones that you don't know what you're doing on. Pick the ones that you have a real difficult trouble with, because yes, you're uncomfortable. You're not going to like getting these problems wrong, but it's going to force you to help reinforce the weaker parts of your knowledge base. So you can go into the exam, you already feel confident about the ones you have, you knock them out of the park, but now you feel confident about the ones that you're weak about. That's often the ones that make the difference. Those 2 or 3 problems that you just didn't get before, you mastered. That allows you to get better. And I said this before, have grace, but be realistic and be kind, right? Progress is more important than perfection here, especially with a full-time job. If you find that there's a day you just can't study, give yourself some grace. Don't add stress. This is already a stressful situation. Take a step back and try to revisit what you're looking at for your study habits. So assuming that you've got all the studying down and you have some good tips, the other parts are pass the exam. You have to also register and get your experience validated. I mentioned this earlier. When you're getting your work experience for your exam, make sure you communicate with your supervisor. Let them know you're tracking towards the PE. That's the best starting point. Let them know you want to have them as a reference, so they know they're going to be prepared to sign off on this for you. Review the state's criteria. NCEES has a really good template for tracking your experience. But look at what your state's experience is. What are they calling general? What are they calling engineering decision-making? How many years they need? What breakdown, what proportion of general and what sort of detailed engineering design do you need? Read that before you start the P exam. So as you start, even on day one, you pass your FE, you have 4 years to go maybe into your P. If you know how the state's asking you to break down your different experiences in terms of months and days and projects, it just makes it easier. You don't want to get to 4 years from now and let that be the hump. Oh, I don't want to redo a 14-page experience list and have to reshuffle all this stuff. You're only adding more barriers in the future that make it more difficult for you to get the exam. Spend a few minutes up front today, look at the criteria, look at the forums, look at the state's application, and set yourself on the course to make sure you keep your data in a way that's easy to just hand the file over the states when they're ready for the exam. When you're gaining this experience too, you want to make sure you're asking your manager, your team for varied assignments. Presumably you already communicated you're going after your PE or your PG. It's important that you communicate that you need to show a lot of various experience in this. You can't just be doing borings in the field or test pits all day. You have to actually have engineering knowledge and engineering judgment on this. So you may want to communicate, hey, I might be able to do this field work now, but I really need to make sure I get some experience in the reporting or lab testing or the analyses, because this is a really important part and key of my growth in getting a PE license. You have to ask for, and again, just keep putting back, this is towards my PE license. This is an important part of my career. I need to get these different assignments. I gotta get variety here. Seek out the responsibility. Don't just allow your PM to hand you work. I mean, in many cases, when you're entry level, you're an emerging professional, that's what happens. But ask for tasks that involve judgment and coordination and decisions. And then track your project role. Were you involved in just the field work? Were you involved in the observation, record keeping, the analysis, the review? Will you engage with the client or the stakeholders in permitting discussions or the economical analysis or the scheduling analyses? All these things have engineering judgment to them. As long as you can show these are the tasks I did, as well as here's the responsibility I had, that's a very easy way to show progressive growth to state boards and also show your experience over time. And the last is, as you get mentored, make sure you're observing. Your supervisors, your managers, they're going to want to see you handling more complex work because that shows you can take on more responsibility. Watch how they take on responsibility, how they manage their work, and how they make progressive decisions along the way. As you start to see those things, you may emulate them. You might do the same thing. That allows them to build trust in your decision-making capabilities, allows them to build trust in how you make decisions. The more trust they have in you, the more responsibility you get, and it makes it just a little bit easier. It allows the wheels to run a little bit smoother. And the engineering licensure boards, they want to see that you're getting this mentoring work from your team, but also it's not just drafting and data collection. They want to see that you're working with other engineers to do analyses, to make judgment calls. As long as you're making these judgment calls and you're using engineering analyses and judgment, that's part of the progressive work experience. It's not just typing boring logs. If you're using the boring log to then create a cross-section, to then help someone do an analysis, you have to use your judgment, geology or engineering. You have to use your professional judgment to make that decision, to connect those two lines together and come up with soil properties to give that information to the engineers. There's judgment in that too. So make sure you're very keen on what you do there. Now, how do you track your experience and maintain your references? You got to make sure that you're starting early. Don't get to the last minute here where you want to download your state application, try to fill out a long list of your last 4 or 5 years of experience. Start early. It's easy enough to do it when you do your timesheets every week or once a month. Hey, I finished my timesheets. I'll spend 5 minutes. I want to add at the end of the week what project did I work on in general. And you don't have to have a large amount of details. It can be project name, scope, location, what dates you worked on it, the supervising PE you had, and then your role. 1 or 2 sentences. I was field work. I did design. I did cross sections. I wrote engineering properties, prepared the report. All you need is a little bit of information. You may not have the time to make this long paragraph. That's okay. Take these 4 bullet points, put them in a list. At the end of the month, just add these projects in bullets. If you're asked by the board to add and elaborate on what you've done, it'll be an easy way for you to jog your memory. I remember that project. I can add that more information back there too. And if you find key learning moments where you went from doing field work only to going into the office and doing your first pile design, your first case on analysis, make a note. Hey, went from fieldwork here to do my first design for deep foundations or shallow foundations. It'll help trigger your mind as you go through this process and you hand over your file to the board. Here is progressive growth I've had along the way, from field staff to technical to managing a staff and so on and so forth. So take this information early and keep record of it early there as well. And the last slide I have here is, now you've got your PE license or you're on track for it. The most important thing, and similar to what Stephanie mentioned before, is your PE, which means you have professional ethics, right? ASCE's canon, you're always protecting and holding paramount to safety and health and welfare of the public. That comes above everything. And with a PE, that's even more of consequence to you. You're accountable. Once you stamp it, you own it, right? They're going to hold you at a higher level of standard because you've gone through this level of training and education that's above the baseline. So just make sure you're keeping this as part of your ethos as you move forward. As a PE, be mindful of conflict of interest, disclose things that may affect your judgment, may affect your ability to do something that's independent, maintain quality, even on fast projects or low budget projects you might have along your work. Even when you're working in academia and you have a very small research project or a very large research project, right? Quality is huge. Don't let that be something that's going to make you feel like you have to take a step back. You want to take a step forward with this. Mentor others, right? When you get a PE license, you have the ability now to be a formal mentor for EITs and others. Same for academia. You get your PE, please help to mentor students behind you and help them grow forward. Model and teach these standards and model and teach the growth that you have behind them here. And as a PE, you're a geotechnical engineer, maybe your skill set's geotechnics. PE is amazing because we're the only board that's self-regulating, meaning if you get a PE in civil, you can do structural, you can do geotechnical, you can do water resource, you can do mechanical if you want to, or chemical if your experience lends you to such. The public trusts us. That's why they give us the ability to make these decisions. But it also means that we're self-regulating. So you have to practice within your area of expertise. So if you're taking the geotechnical exam and you're a geotechnical expert, great, practice in geotechnics. If you feel uncomfortable doing structures, then make sure you let your peers know or your groups know, hey, I don't practice in that line. You may want to go to a structural engineer instead. And last thing is just about public trust, right? PE is professional ethics in my mind too. Make sure you treat this PE license with respect along the way, and I'll do the same for you in return. Once you get your PE, keep going. Stephanie mentioned the CPC tracker. Your PE requires you to have continuing education, at least 1 hour per month, usually for most states. Be a lifelong learner. You've invested in a career, not a job. Keep going with it, right? Take more coursework. Stay knowledgeable, stay curious, help others behind you, join professional societies like ASCE, Geo-Institute, YMG, NCEES, or others that you find useful and helpful for your growth. Earn new certifications and give back. I want to end this slideshow just by saying thank you to the ASCE, Geo-Institute, to YMG, and to NCEES for allowing me to have this platform and share my experience. I hope you all do the same thing. I gave this presentation today because, like my last slide said, please give back. Go for a PE. Get your PE, and then do the same thing to help others around you. We will be able to lift up all the folks that come behind us. It's a really important part of being an engineer, which is giving back for society. So I want to say thank you and open the floor up for any questions and answers you might have.
On behalf of all the audience, thank you, Vatsal and Stef, for an amazing presentation. I think it was very informative. I'll jump in here to moderate questions, and the way to ask questions is to drop into the chat, the live chat that's going on. To kick things off, I'll say to either of you, question one will be, how can I demonstrate that pre-graduation experience, i.e. internships, constitute as true engineering experience?
Okay, so I'll take that one because that is definitely a state board issue. Some states will count that work and some states will not. So, and quite frankly, once you get the requisite number of years beyond you, then that time frame doesn't always matter. But you do have to document it in kind of the same way that you would any other work entry. And so you're going to want to have someone who can sign off on it. You're going to have to show your sort of progression over time. So it has to be creditable engineering work for it to count. And often they're kind of in short, semester 3 or 4 month stints. So you have to separate those out if you were not working contiguously in that time frame. So it's hard to do. It's not easy to do. And it is also not always going to be counted. So it's just something to bear in mind.
That's good. Vatsal, unless you have something to add, I'll move on to the next one.
No, I think Stephanie covered it. She's right.
Sounds good. Next one, maybe Vatsal, this would be a better fit for you, is how do you recommend folks in academia go about gaining the industry level experience typically required for licensure?
That's a great question. And I think if you're in academia, it's sometimes hard to get the engineering judgment. However, one great part of it, a lot of state boards allow you to have a year or two of experience credited towards your master's and your PhD. So if you're in academia and you went to advanced degrees, you automatically get a year or two of credit sometimes for that work that you've done. I will also say collaborate, right? Sometimes the best thing you can do in your academia is to collaborate with outside professions, consulting and others. If you can get outside collaborators to work with you on research, to work with you with coursework that you have, you can show ongoing engineering judgment and ongoing engineering experience by doing that. The state boards will review that type of work, group projects you worked on with consulting. You're heavily involved in the process with them. You brought them to site assignments and those sort of things. They are engineering judgment with you. Research as well. If you're doing research and you get that research peer reviewed, bring in someone from consulting, bring in someone from industry here that might be able to help you along the way. That research, as long as it's technical minded and can support the industry, can also count towards engineering judgment as well.
I would also just add that some states will also issue credit for teaching upper level engineering design courses and graduate courses. So you can receive credit for being just teaching courses, but they must be upper level design courses. So.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Let's keep going here. Do you recommend getting licensed as early or easiest as possible, regardless of the state?
I can probably share my experience on that one, Stephanie. I recommend as soon as you can do it, to do it. As I mentioned before, life gets more difficult, and there's a wonderful thing Stephanie mentioned called decoupling, which allows you to take your exam in many states earlier than your 4-year experience mark. You might take the exam in year 1 out of school. You might wait 3 years to get the actual license in hand, but things get more difficult. So if you can get it earlier, if you have the time study now, you can get all your application pulled together. I would absolutely say take the opportunity to get the exam now. Get it done, get it over with, and move forward.
Sounds good. I'll get to some in the chat now. There's a couple that hit close to home for me, since it's a Canadian type question. One is, I'm planning to take the PEng exam in Canada very soon. Are there any steps or requirements if I want to register in the US? Another Canadian question is, my inquiry is about the eligibility requirements and the process for obtaining the professional engineer PEng license in Canada as an internationally educated engineer. I'll start off by saying this webinar is not for Canada. We can't speak to that. But personally, I am a professional engineer in the province of British Columbia in Canada, and I moved over to the US last year in the state of Washington. So in my experience, for the province and state that I practiced in, they counted all my Canadian experience towards professional engineering experience in Washington. They waived the FE exam for me, and I had to take the PE exam, and I was licensed. That said, this could vary. So I'll let Steph jump in on that if they want to speak, if she wants to speak on Canadian experience.
Yeah, so again, that's going to vary by state. Some states are very amenable to accepting having a PEng, and others are not. So it will vary as far as what you'd be required to provide and or do for each individual state. Obviously, the states that sort of border Canada tend to have some more lenient rules, but you would definitely have to check with the state board on that one.
Keep going here. Similar question. Somebody else has 7 years experience, but in Europe, does that count towards PE licensure? I'm assuming the answer is it depends, but let's see what you say.
It does depend, but for the vast majority of boards, they would accept that work experience as well. Now, again, if it needs to be signed off on by a PE, that means US licensed PE. So depending on on the actual company you were working for, something like that, that could be challenging. But for the most part, the answer is yes. A state board would actually accept that. Most of them do.
Sounds good. Two of the same question, which means it's important. Can you practice geotechnical engineering after taking the PE in another civil subdiscipline? And similarly, with the new exam format, if you take the civil geotechnical PE exam, can you still practice in other fields if you decide to pivot your career?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Just because you got your PE in geotechnics in your exam doesn't mean you cannot practice in other disciplines. But as I mentioned before, the PE license is self-regulating, meaning they trust us individually to decide what we're competent in. So you will know what your experience is. And if you spent only a couple of weeks doing bridge design, you shouldn't go from geotechnics to bridge design. But if you spent the next 20 years of your career now going from geotechnics into bridge design, you may find that you're very experienced in it and you have the ability to practice in that, then you certainly can. It's not qualifying you to only do geotechnics, but again, it requires us as engineers to make that important judgment call. Do I feel qualified to do that? And only you'll know that answer.
Let's keep going. Can I apply for licensure in another state, e.g. California, before receiving licensure in my resident state?
You can. You can be licensed in any state that you are qualified to be licensed in. You don't have to reside there. In some instances, there are states that are easier to get your first license in than others. And so people do that. Do state boards like that people do that? Not necessarily, but it certainly is, it is what it is. And so if you need to apply to another state first before you apply, even if you take the exams and pass the exams in one state, you can still apply to another state for your first license. I will just say along those lines is you really need to apply to just one board for your first license. I have a lot of people that want to apply, like throw the net wide with their first license, and you really should not do that. You should apply to one board, obtain that license, and then you can throw the net as wide as you want to just make sure you can get licensed in as many states as you would like.
Okay, let's keep going. What would you recommend to someone who has their PG but is interested in a PE and PG being professional geologist or geoscientist?
I'd say go for it. Get all the initials you can. But oftentimes, many states require an engineering background with the ABAG accreditation that Stephanie mentioned before. So there are probably some bridge courses you can take. If you're willing to take those courses and fill the requisite ABAG requirements, then go for the FE first and foremost. And then from the FE, you have to springboard to the PE. But I love the enthusiasm to keep ongoing learning. It's fantastic.
And I would suggest that if you are, you've been in the field for a long time and you want to get into engineering, one of the things that is not easy, but is certainly an option, is to just get a master's degree in the field that you're interested in engineering. That's going to benefit you in a lot of ways for engineering licensure. You do have to have work experience as well, so you'll have to have those pieces as well. But as far as education is concerned, a master's degree is a great option to at least have that piece that the vast majority of states would definitely consider.
Right. Now let's keep going here. We have a couple minutes left. If doing forensic engineering, what governs which state? Do you need to hold a PE? Is it based on where your client is, where the project is, what courts may be involved, or anything else? And I think this can extend beyond forensic. I think what governs which state do you need your licensure in?
Yeah, it's not client-based. If your client's in different states, it's about where the project is based. So in almost every situation, that project is that specific state. So if you're working in Kentucky and you have a national client, you still need to be licensed in Kentucky to be able to handle that work in Kentucky. The only exception to that rule is sometimes federal facilities, military bases, and those sort of things, or ports and harbors. When they're international, then you can be in a separate state than you have your site in. But yeah, there's one for federal and military. Otherwise, the state's boundaries where the project is located, that's the state that you can be licensed in. Stephanie, if you want to add anything on that.
No, that's perfect answer.
Sounds good. Brad, feel free to cut us off. I'll just squeak in a few more. Do you need to pass the FE first for hours towards the PE to start accumulating?
You do not. There might be some state boards that would say you have to have the FE before the PE. For the boards that auto-approve anybody to take the PE exam, which is a growing number of states, you do have to have passed an FE exam first, because the system is not going to mark you approved if you don't have that FE exam. But that being said, there are a lot of state boards, especially the decoupled boards, that they just want you to come to them when you can check all the boxes of the requirements. And so they don't necessarily care if you take the FE exam after. Of course, it's much more logical to take the FE exam first and then the PE exam, but it's not necessarily a fast and true requirement for every board. And again, check with your state board, because every board's going to deal with that a little bit differently.
Is it possible to receive any waivers for certain years of experience required for the PE exam by completing a PhD?
Yes, there are a couple of states that do that. I think Wyoming comes to mind, that if you have a PhD in engineering, you can waive the PE exam. Again, I would only do that probably, I usually suggest that to professors mostly, because it's great for them to obtain the license, but they really only need to be in Wyoming. They don't need it to, and that was the reason why Wyoming did that, was they really wanted to encourage professors to get licensed. But the vast majority of states, you would really not find very many waivers for their PE exam. FE is a little bit more common, but PE definitely not. That's usually a requirement.
I think they're asking about the experience counting too, not just the exam waiver. So I believe yes.
Yeah. So if you have a master's and a PhD, they have to be in engineering. And most states will give 1 year for a master's degree and 2 years for a PhD. So if you have both, that would be 3 years. That is, again, that's a state by state thing, but that's the majority that will, that's the way they treat that. So yeah.
Sounds good. Are there other things you recommend above others for ongoing education after licensure? So I think that's beyond the PE. What else do you recommend pursuing?
Yeah, I think it's important to continue your depth of knowledge. I think CPCs are great. Now, you can do 1 hour lunch and learns. We do them very often as part of our ongoing licensure, but it's hard to get really deep on a topic in a 1 hour conversation. The ASCE Geo-Institute, and I'm putting in a plug here, not because they're asking me to, but they do a fantastic job at having full day workshops, and they have half day workshops at either the conferences or local regions. You can really get deep into those conversations on something technical. I think those are great to continue education. Yes, you get your CPCs or PDHs that are required, but it really allows you to continue getting deeper into the subject of geotechnics that we're looking after. So look for conferences, look for professional societies that have those topics. I like recommending those because you can get deeper than just an hour lunch and learn on something that's very surface level.
And apologies to everyone. If we can't answer your question, I'll just put in the last one here and combine two. As a PE in New Jersey, how many states can you get to practice in? Are there restrictions? And then I think similarly, is there a way to practice in all states? And I think we can kind of dive a little bit more into reciprocity here.
Yeah, I'll start off with, as a PE in New Jersey, you get to practice in New Jersey. But it doesn't stop you from practicing elsewhere. My first PE was in New Jersey. I happened to carry it through reciprocity, like Stephanie mentioned, to NCEES records, to all the other states across the board. The PE exam was a national exam, so I was able to follow through. There are still state by state specific law exams and laws and regulation exams you have to take for every single state. So there's still an exam for many states, but they're very straightforward. They're often open book. But a PE in a state allows you to practice only in that state. You could seek reciprocity in other states once you finish up, though. I don't know if you want to add anything, Stephanie, to that.
Well, I say this a lot in daily questions, but there is no national license. That's not a thing. It is, as Vatsal said, state by state. So that is part of the reason why the record program has existed for as long as it has, because every state's going to expect you to apply to them and supply them the very similar documentation. They're just not going to say, oh, you've applied to New Jersey. I'll just take New Jersey's application materials and use it for Massachusetts. That's just not how it works. So the record is the way to be able to apply to multiple states. There are people that just apply to all of them. Now, you also have to submit an application to each of those states too. So it's not as easy as just sending your record off. But it certainly makes it a little bit easier. So it's certainly something to consider if you're going to do a lot of states.
Yeah, I want to add one more plug for you, Stef, in the record. Being licensed in all these states, if you're still following along, get an NCEES record account. Put your information into it because it's so much easier. You may not need a license in another state now, but trying to redo that experience for one or many states becomes very arduous and it's a long process. The record is probably my single best investment in my professional licensure journey. So I want to add that to you, Stephanie, on that.
Sounds good. And there's also just if you didn't know, there's a cost involved in being licensed in multiple states. You just be aware of that in paying those fees annually. With that, I'll close this off. Thank you again, Vatsal and Stef, for the great presentation. And thanks, Brad and GI, for allowing us to host our first webinar for the YMC. If you haven't already, please join our LinkedIn group. There's links in the chat, and watch the recording. There's the QR code at the very start if you missed it. I'll kick it to Brad now.
That was excellent. And thanks, guys, for taking so many questions. We really appreciate it. I think, that's a lot of the value of these. And so I have to go the other way with that, too, and thank our viewers for asking the questions today. That's what makes these really valuable sessions. But Vatsal and Stef, great presentations. Thank you for doing this. Intisar, an admirable job moderating. It's not easy once the questions start flying in, and you did a great job today. So we really appreciate that. For all of our viewers, if you liked what you saw and you're here at the end, so you probably did, go back again and click like, subscribe, and get notifications. And yes, we will let you know every time we post something to this here YouTube channel. Our next live stream is in just 7 days. You can come right back here and watch Richard Bathurst's second live streamed Cross USA lecture for the summer. You can find registration information on that on our Eventbrite page. It's free as always. And we're actually going to be here somehow through some weird quirk with live streams for the next 4 Tuesdays in a row, not including today. So we have a lot more great content coming to you this summer, and you want to be around for that. Intisar, Stef, Vatsal, thank you guys so much. I hope this was fun.
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
You kind of have
Absolutely.
to say yes when I put you on the spot there.
That's
but
right.
Nonetheless, you seemed like you meant it. So thanks again, guys. We really appreciate it. And we'll see everybody out there next week with another Geo-Institute live stream.